Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 13th of February and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So this is episode 403 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big industry headlines across the franchise and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place.
So have you left your sack outside your front door ready for the postman to be delivering all your Valentine's cards for tomorrow, Curtis? Or?
Well, absolutely, yes, yeah. But it's actually my wife's birthday, so I rather suspect the cards will be for her, not me.
You better make sure you do things right. Valentine's Day and a birthday. Oh, Christ.
It just means I can never forget.
You've no chance, have you? You've no chance. So we've got quite some good headlines this week, but we've got to give a massive shout out to a fantastic, insightful interview we've had this week with Steve Labasse, who is the head of motor retail at BDO, and he was talking through in the special midweek interview about the Motor 150 report, which we have covered a couple of times on the podcast over the years, but also talking obviously BDO's projections on mergers and acquisitions in 2021 and possible market trends. But I found it a really interesting, insightful interview, that one, Curtis.
Yeah, it was a fascinating conversation with Steve, and the Motor 150 is quite different from any other reports out there. Its USP is that it takes an aggregated look at the top 150 dealers and treats them more or less as one company. How did they perform in any given year? And they've been doing this since 2008, 2009. So there's a lot to look back on. But it's what was particularly interesting, as you say, was some of the forecasts and predictions that Steve was making for this year. So do look out for that. We posted it during the week.
Definitely, and we've got another exclusive coming up this week as well.
We have indeed. We've got an interview with Mike Hawes, Chief Exec of the SMMT. Now, Mike is someone that we refer to definitely on a monthly basis because, of course, we look at the new car registrations figures, and he's always got something of interest to say about the state of play of the new car market. But we're interviewing him, and that will go up sometime next week. And that will be a wide-ranging interview because there's a lot to talk about.
There is. I mean, the challenge is going to be trying to keep it sort of digestible and reasonably sort of short in many ways, because you think around everything that's going on in the sector at the minute with COVID, his reforecast, his new and used figures for 2021 and 2022, he's looking at EV, the whole EU Brexit discussion. There's so much going on in there at the minute, and obviously we've just had the used car figures announced for the full year 2020. And we've had the recent figures for January as well. So I think the key for us is going to be trying to keep it tight and concise on the focus areas. But I'm sure Mike has got a lot to share on his opinion of things at the minute.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to hear his views on this year, how Q1 and the rest of the year will pan out. So do watch out for that. We'll be posting that during the week. And this week we've also got an exclusive from eBay Motors Group, our sponsors, looking at car and van search trends in January. So we'll get to that during the show. And also a shout out for NADA, because I guess some listeners tuning into this will usually be overseas in America at this time of the year, wandering around the NADA convention, but it's all virtual and online this year, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure for the first time ever, so I've got to visit NADA, but in the virtual space. So all my time in the industry, I know it doesn't, and everybody keeps telling me it's fine. It's even worse when I watched the closing show last night, and they were saying we'll see you in Las Vegas next year, and I'm thinking maybe not. Please go. I'm in the virtual world, but no, I mean, it is great, and anybody that's got the chance to watch some of the the events, the main stage, the live discussions, and there's I mean, working your way through it, there's a lot going on over there, even in the virtual space. And as I mean, you've been to NADA and you know what it's like there, and obviously they've tried maintaining some of that buzz and excitement that I think you guys have experienced in the physical form over there. But it's been a great 3 days, late evenings, unfortunately, with the time difference, but some great content just to try and work your way through. But yeah, so everybody who would normally be there, they're probably looking forward to Vegas next year, I suspect.
Yeah, Vegas, I can't think why, but Vegas is always a particularly popular one.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got some good headlines this week. We're trying to cram some of the main stories in, but as always, there's a lot going on in the sector at the minute. So we have picked a few interesting ones to talk to you about today.
Yeah, starting with Auto Express, and the headline there is used car sales fall to lowest level since 2012. So this is the SMMT figures that came out at the beginning of the week, which showed used sales fell by 14.9% in 2020, and that was as a result of the coronavirus lockdowns, which kept showrooms closed for a lot of the year, and also, of course, the impact on consumer confidence. So over the course of the year, a total of 6,752,959 used cars changed hands, but that was down from 7.9 million in 2019. And as we said at the top, that was the worst year since 2012. And the market typically bobs around the 8 million mark, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it has been declining from the highs that we've seen at 8.2 million, but we have seen average from 6.7 million up to your 7.5. So I think the 8.2 and 8.1 that we saw in recent years is probably an unrealistic marketplace. But I believe that all things considered, I think although it's a significant drop at 14.9%, I think it's still testament to the sector of how well they've performed. I mean, the fourth quarter was only down 6.16% at 1.693 million. And all things considered, they only did 1.8 million last year in the fourth quarter of the year. So it's not it seems a lot, but it's not a huge volume of vehicles with what's going on in the market. Q3 was up 4.4%, so experiencing the pent-up demand that we suffered through the second quarter. The harm was done. Reality is the harm was done in that second quarter with a 28.7% drop year on year, with the significant closures of the dealer network and activity that took place at the back end of March into April and May before the showrooms could open again on the 1st of June in England. So, I think all things considered, the market's performed reasonably well considering, the lockdowns, the tiered restrictions and further lockdowns that we experienced through the year.
Yeah, you're right, and it's probably only a footnote, but it's worth mentioning anyway that October was actually up 3.7%, and that was actually the fourth consecutive month of growth. You said Q3 was up, but we saw 4 months of growth before the fall in November and December, which did bring the level down again. And within the figures, it's worth pointing that out that alternative fueled vehicles were actually up. They increased 5.2%, with increases for BEVs and hybrids, but not PHEVs. They were down.
So, I mean, it's worth heading over to let's say we're talking about the Auto Express story. Obviously, the SMMT do publish it, and they have published performance by model, by colour, etc. as they've been doing recently on the SMMT website there. So head over to there and have a look at some of the detail behind the performances of the used cars through the year. And I'm sure Mike next week will tell us a little bit more about his thoughts on the sector and what he thought about the performance of used cars last year.
Yep. Now, next story is from AM Online, and the headline is Consumer New Car Finance Volumes Declined 25% in 2020, FLA reports. So this is the monthly stats from the FLA, which shows that finance sales declined by 18% in December, which brought the final tally for the year down by 25%. And in the data, the FLA revealed that the decline in the consumer new car finance market outstripped the decline in new car registrations, which were down 10.9% in December. So no big surprises there. With fewer new cars being sold, you'd expect new car finance to also decline.
Yeah, and we have had Adrian Daly on recently on the podcast, so it'd be worth heading over to that interview that we had with Adrian. A great interview and a really nice guy, and certainly knows that sector in and out, inside out. So again, it might be worth sort of trying to get Adrian back on once we sort of get a little bit further into this year, maybe get this first quarter out there and get his view on the impact of 2020 and what's been happening with the COVID and the drop in new cars, but actually, that impact on that finance sector and the leasing sector, because again, as we come out of COVID and into the EU exit transition, well, it's the end of the transition now, it's dealing with what's going on and the onset of the EV market. It'd be worth getting Adrian's view on what he believes will happen in that finance sector for the market.
Yeah, definitely. And just worth pointing out that used car sales were also covered within the FLA reports. The finance on used cars was down 8% in December and 18% for the year, which gave it a value. That was 18% for the year. So that was based on 1.23 million vehicles sold.
Exactly. So, and then moving on, we've got the exclusives now from eBay Motors Group, and that is the cars and van performance for January. So, should we look at the vans first for a change? Because we always seem to go to cars first, don't we? So let's look at the vans first, Curtis. And what's your view on the data that's here?
Yeah, vans, some interesting stats here. So the data that's been produced by eBay Motors Group is based on visits and searches to eBay Motors and Gumtree Motors. Now, what they did was they looked at the last weeks of December and January and the level of email inquiries for vans, and they were actually up 61%. In those relative weeks, so huge growth there, which it is very encouraging. We've obviously covered a lot on the van market over recent weeks and months because there is significant demand. We don't know how long it will continue, but significant demand for vans because of this boom in home deliveries.
Yeah, and like you say, 61% increase through that period is an impressive rise, and a 30% year-on-year increase as well from the rise that they experienced in the same period in 2019. So again, showing that demand for the vans, the LCV market. There is a lot of questions at the minute taking place of how long it will continue. Is it sustainable as we start to get through the end of the third lockdown? And there's a lot of conversations around the market reopening and things like this, but it's I don't think the general view is I don't think they believe that the bubble will burst. I think there is a sort of a deflation potentially coming, but not necessarily a burst. So the van market is very strong at the minute and still going very well.
And that's actually borne out by the research they've done of Google Trends, so anyone tapping in van for sales within Google, and the eBay Motors Group have tracked week on week growth to, in fact, the levels are back to where they were in the autumn. So very encouraging there for van dealers and anyone with a van on their forecourts at the moment.
They're doing well. So cars, lots going on in the car car market, and a lot of analysis here from eBay Motors Group on performance in December and January in the cars, because they're talking about the stock volume per dealership at 51.5 on average, compared to December 20 at 53.2. And Jan 20 at 59.1. So drop on last year's January performance and a marginal drop on the December figures.
Yeah, and average month-on-month days to sale increased from 42.2 to 48.7 days. No big surprise there, because as we know, showrooms and forecourts have been closed, so it is taking longer to sell cars, albeit online. Interesting that despite the lockdown, there was actually an 18% year-on-year increase in customer leads. So customers are unable to get to physical sites, but they are on the internet, they are searching, and this is generating a lot of leads.
Yeah, and there's a bit of analysis on the average selling price. So Car Supermarket average selling price is down 3.3% to 11,998. The franchise dealer sector is down marginally at 1.2%, down to 13,980. No change, interestingly, for the little or no change, should I say, for the independent dealer sector. It's marginally down from 9,348 to 9,346. So a very a minor, if anything, of change there. But overall, equating to a minus 2.2% drop in average selling price. So very little change overall. We've seen the days to sell increase. We've seen the stock levels change, but actually the average price has seen very little change.
Yeah, it's holding steady there. And one final thing that eBay Motors Group have looked at, and it's the first time they've done this, is the most viewed manufacturers across their platform. So I've got a top 5, because we haven't done one for a couple of weeks, have we? No. So at number 5, we've got BMW, and they took a 6.9% share over the course of January. Number 4, Mercedes-Benz at 7.5%. Number 3, Volkswagen at 7.8%. Number 2, Vauxhall, 9.3%. And number 1, taking a 12.9% share of searches, was Ford.
And Ford, I mean, they're because they do the top 10 for the fastest selling makes and models, which we won't go through, but because you can see the figures yourself when it's published. So in January of this year, based on a minimum of 100 vehicles, but the Ford Puma was the fastest selling car at 29.9 days. So demand out there for the Ford Puma at the minute in the sector.
Yeah, and all these stats for the cars and vans you can view from today, really, on the eBay Motors website. So do head over there if you want to take a deeper dive into those stats.
So you are listening to All the Chatter That Matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favourite podcasts.
Right, and now we're going to just take a little look at the interview that we did with Steve Labas during the week. So Steve is one of the audit partners at BDO, and he looks after motor retail there. So we quizzed him on a number of subjects, but we thought you'd be interested in this little extract. Within the report, Steve, you talk about the sector adopting leaner and more efficient approaches. How was this accelerated by COVID, and how do you see that developing over the course of 2021?
So I think, again, in our Motor 150 report, we previously had noted that we saw the sector going through one of evolution rather than revolution. And I think if you think back to 2008, with the banking crisis, there was quite a lot of changes at that period of time in how businesses operated and cost base and so on. But I think the difference back in 2008 to 2020 was perhaps the technology was not quite there in terms of all the various apps and IT and what have you, social media compared to 2020. So that obviously is significantly advanced now in 2020 and 2021. So I think those businesses have really had to embrace this new way of working, remote selling, remote dealing with the customers and so on. And as a result, the digitization and IT infrastructure has been even more important and have been really at the forefront of how dealers have coped with COVID. And I think as a result of that, all the dealers have then looked at whether it be workforces, look at their practices, how they engage with customers. And it's just, as you said, that whole process has been accelerated partly down to necessity through COVID. I think the biggest challenge now is hopefully when we get back to normal, which is hopefully sooner rather than later, is that all the groups and every business doesn't revert back to what they were doing pre-March 2020 and basically have the best of what they've learned post March 20 and still incorporate the best of what they did have pre-March 2020.
And as we say, a little bit of a taster there that's, very worth listening to the whole podcast with Steve Labasse there. Very insightful and certainly someone that we'll have back on the podcast in the future to talk about their views on market trends and what's happening. And, it does go into a little bit in the podcast around EV as well, and his views on the EV sector, whether it's sustainable, whether it's achievable, and whether it's an evolution or a revolution to the sector as well. So a great interview there with Steve Labasse.
Now, the next headline is from AM Online, and it's Cazoo brings used car preparation in-house with Smart Fleet Solutions acquisition. So this is the latest acquisition from Cazoo, and it's kind of hot on the heels of the acquisitions we saw last year of Imperial Cars and Drover, the car subscription service. So the acquisition of Smart Fleet Solutions, we don't know how much they paid for it, but this effectively means that all their used car prep can now be done in-house.
Yeah, and I think this is the talk of the week, I think, generally across most of the trade platforms and the trade forums of the social media. So, again, very quick moving through his acquisitions here with Alex Chesterman, as you say there, with the Imperial purchase and followed by the subsequent sort of Drover purchase, which was, an interesting one in terms of that entrance into that subscription market for the business. And we've got a little bit on that later on from some of the manufacturers, but again you can see where whether I don't know whether it's the right way to describe it, but the story is playing out a little bit now as to what their strategic plan is. Lots of conversations whether it's a change to the original plan that they had or whether it was a plan that they've always had into enter these sectors. But I suspect we'll see an IPO at some point in the near future at the speed that he's moving and building the picture for Cazoo. But again, huge acquisition this week following the two big ones that we talked about last year.
Yep, and staying with AM Online, next headline is Peugeot launches new discounts for online buyers. So this is very much about what Peugeot are doing in the run-up to March. And it's all about stimulating the market, which you can't blame them for doing, but particularly interesting because it involves discounting online. So Peugeot is giving new car buyers up to £950 in additional discounts if they buy their new car through its buy online platform. And this promotion runs up to the end of March. So quite clearly and concisely targeted.
Yeah, and it does point out. There's always deposit contributions and finance offers by the franchises through the dealer network to the consumer. Obviously, that would normally be handled through the marketing, through the dealership, etc. But again, it's this balance now, trying to get into that online e-commerce space with it, and we've not heard anything else on this. So whether this is the first manufacturer that's gone out and sort of talked about it and promoted it, but they do talk about that this is an exclusive exclusively for you campaign, and the £950 is actually topping up some of the existing deposit contributions, which will take some vehicles with a total benefit of more than 5,000. So again, as you say, Curtis, trying to stimulate that market whilst we are in a online only environment before the showrooms can reopen again, which we are hoping will happen sometime soon. But for the minute, as you say, we've talked about it, haven't we, how crucial the Q1 is for the dealer network and the manufacturers. You know, the first quarter of the year, we are weeks away from the new plate on the 1st of March there. So again, crucial time to get activity taking place. And you know, the reports are a lot of the network are down on orders for March, as you'd expect, anywhere between 30 and 50% down at this current point in terms of March order take. So again, it's a crucial time to start building those orders and getting product into the market.
Yeah, and I suspect we'll see more of these campaigns being rolled out over the coming days in the run-up to March. And I did notice that Whatcar put something out during the week about the level of discounting that's going on across franchise dealers at the moment. So, plenty of activity there to stimulate the market, because March will be crucial. And, that's going to be one of the areas we'll be talking to Mike Hawes about from the SMMT, because we know it's always an important month, but probably even more so this year than it's been before.
Definitely. And the final story we've got actually links back to the Cazoo one a little bit, in terms of that Kia to launch subscription services in 2021, and that's a story on motortrader.com. So we were chatting before the show about this one, that Kia's subscription program, which is one of other manufacturers now, and I think we were talking about JLR, VW, and certainly Volvo, just to name a few there, but they've introduced this program called Kia Flex, which was introduced in Korea in 2019, but it's going to be launched to a global version later this year under the name of Kia Subscription. So an interesting move from Kia, and it's not the first news recently from Kia, because we were talking about that as well, weren't we?
Yes, indeed, and this ties in neatly with the acquisition that Hyundai Motor Group, the parent of Kia, made last year, I think it was, of Sixt Leasing. So this is where the vehicles will come from, and that's where the subscription service will be managed, and does make perfect sense. And this is part and parcel of the Kia's rebranding, because they launched a new logo a couple of weeks ago, and significantly they dropped the motors part from their branding, because they want to now be perceived as a tech company, as a mobility company, not necessarily just a car company. So launching a subscription service fits very neatly into that.
Yeah, and they refer to the recent announcement from Kia there that to update its Plan S strategy for its future business at the 2021 CEO Investor Day that was held digitally in Seoul recently from the Kia president over there. So again, very much moving forward with that brand into it, and I suspect we'll see a lot more from these guys over the coming years. But again, we talked about Cazoo earlier in terms of Drover acquisition. Now we're talking about Kia with their subscription model as well, amongst others. So you can start to see this mobility world emerging, and subscription services coming definitely to the forefront of a lot of the manufacturers at the minute as we move forward.
So that's all for this week. Thanks for joining us. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Stay safe and well, and join Philip and I again next weekend for all the chatter that matters. Do look out for our interview with Mike Hawes, and look out for the interview that we did last week with Steve Labas, which is available online now. So until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.